What is good, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit. Today, the Raiders are officially 3-3, and I am fired up about this one, man. We're gonna talk about this, man. We're gonna get into this one. We're gonna get into why I'm actually really excited for this one. Um, let's talk about this, man. 21-17. I think the storyline coming out was the fact that Jimmy G got hurt at some point. I think right before the first half ended. And he ended up going to the hospital. And it was the backup quarterback that ended up coming in, Brian Hoyer. And, he got us in a field goal range on 2 drives, and ultimately the Raiders won the game. Now, the defense closed it out at the end of the game on a Max Crosby sack, which ultimately ended up being a safety. And just like that, the Raiders won this game. Let's talk about this. I think a lot of people are talking about how, Josh McDaniels not a good coach. I know a lot of people are talking about how Jimmy G's not very good. But I want everyone to relax a little bit, man. The Raiders are officially 3-3. The Raiders are going into a game against the Bears next week that if we win, we're over 500. We would have won 4 games in the first 7 weeks. That's really good. And there's a chance Justin Fields doesn't play next week for the Bears. He ended up getting knocked out of this game. And the Raiders could be 4-3 going into, after that next game next week. Now, we're going to talk about it. I feel like the Raiders have started to figure it out a little bit. And I know it didn't really translate out there on the field. Last week, I felt like against the Packers, the Raiders had a lot of really good drives, and they ultimately just didn't end up in touchdowns. They ended up in field goals. And that kind of continued today, right? If you guys look at just the first half, first drive of the game, we get 3 points. Second drive of the game, we end up throwing an interception. And then the third drive of the game, we actually went down and scored a touchdown. But, we left points out there once again, but the offense is driving. It's starting to click a little bit. And I'll be the first to tell you guys, right? Jimmy G obviously isn't great, right? He's not the best quarterback out there. But I do feel like the Raiders are starting to have a little bit of success. I feel like the offensive line looked a lot better today. And tell me if you guys agree with that. Do you guys feel like the offensive line looked better? I definitely felt like it looked a lot better. Shout out to Chef B. He said, let's effing go. Been a member for 29 months. That's crazy. Big shout out to you, Chef B. I really appreciate it as always. I'm excited about this Raiders roster, man. I'm excited about the team. I'm excited about the direction that we're kind of headed. I know that may not be the popular opinion out there within, Raiders, the fan base, the content creators especially. I know a lot of people are down on Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo. But I'll be the first to tell you guys, I actually like where this Raiders team is at right now, because when I look at the Raiders roster right now, I see a defense that's actually pretty decent, right? It's a defense that's forced some turnovers. It's a defense that's been getting after the quarterback. And it's a defense that's limited big plays. And I think ultimately for the Raiders, that's what you need, right? You need a defense that's going to kind of keep you in the game. And I want you guys to keep in mind, the offense has not come together yet. And we have not had a complete game in which the offense actually has success in the red zone, right? So I think as we kind of continue going forward, if the offense can just find that success, right? Find the ability to score as you get down in the red zone, I think there's a lot of upside here for this offense. So let's get into some of your guys' comments. We'll start right here with Brian. He says, hey, do you believe if Jimmy G is truly injured, the Raiders may make a move for Mac Jones? Not that I want to. I don't think the Raiders are going to go out and get Mac Jones. I don't think that's where the Raiders are at right now, and I don't think that's where the Patriots are either. I think the Patriots want to tank the rest of the season, and I think that's with Mac Jones. And the Raiders, I feel like, is it really an upgrade if you go from Jimmy Garoppolo to Mac Jones, or even, Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer, whoever ends up starting next week? Is it an upgrade to go to Mac Jones? I don't know. Right. I feel like what the Raiders are better off doing is just sticking with the guys you already have in there. Keep in mind, Mac Jones hasn't played in Josh McDaniels' actual offense for 2 seasons. On top of that, he doesn't know the play calls and the play designs, and he doesn't know the verbiage. So for a quarterback, it's going to take him 4 weeks to at least figure everything out. And I feel like that would limit the Raiders. I think the Raiders should just roll forward with either Aiden O'Connell or Brian Hoyer. I felt like Hoyer came in slinging. He had a really nice pass, deep one to Trey Tucker. It was a 48-yard pass. which was the longest play of the season for the Raiders, which is kind of sad, to be honest with you guys. But we came in, we got it done, right? And I think that's all that matters. Brian Hoyer was 6 to 10, 102 yards. He technically played in all of the second half. Jimmy G played in all of the first half. And Jimmy G was 14 of 22 for 162 yards. One touchdown, one interception. But I think all of us can agree the one interception was more so on Devonte Adams than it was on Jimmy G. Let's get into some more of you guys' comments. We got one here from Master Ghost. Said, not only is Josh McDaniels not a good coach, he's also not a good coordinator. Tom Brady was his offense. That's an interesting comment for sure. I don't know if I would 100% agree with that. I feel like the big issue with Josh McDaniels is that he's calling both the plays and he's managing the game, right? Those are two completely different tasks. They're hard, right, to be able to do either or, and this guy's doing both of them. And I think the Raiders are making a mistake right there. I think Josh McDaniels needs to either pass off the play calling duties or pass off the management of the game. He should not be doing both, in my opinion. And I think right there is where the issue is with Josh McDaniels. And I think his game management is worse than his play calling. I think Josh McDaniels is a better play caller than he is a game manager. And I think he's just too conservative from a game management perspective. From a coordinator perspective, I feel like McDaniels calls a good offense, right? And I think sometimes it is up to like the offensive line as well as Jimmy Garoppolo to not only push the ball downfield, but for the offense line to hold up and kind of give him that time. I know people are super harsh on Josh McDaniels. And don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not 100% in on Josh McDaniels, but I feel like McDaniels does do a good job calling plays. And sometimes it's just the guys aren't good enough to kind of get it done, right? Rather, Jimmy G's not pushing the ball downfield or the offensive line's not holding up. But I did feel like today against the Patriots, the offensive line did a pretty damn good job. I don't quote me on this, but I don't think we had any sacks today. So, that's a huge improvement by the offensive line. Thayer Munford started today. Obviously, him and Illuminor did rotate in and out. I felt like Munford had a pretty good game, although he did have one penalty. I think he was lined up on the left side, the one that actually happened. Illuminor obviously came in, played some snaps as well. We'll have to go back and watch the tape on that one. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's 100% that, Josh McDaniels is just a terrible coordinator and he's not a terrible coach. I don't know. I think it's debatable still. I think it's still kind of out there. But the Raiders are 3-3, right? And you can't deny the fact that last year we only won 6 games and we're already at 3 wins. We're like a third of the season done, right? So there's definitely still a lot that the Raiders can kind of continue to do. Shout out to you, Jason Hall. You said Josh McDaniels makes 2 to 4 mistakes every week that cost us. I don't disagree with what you're saying. Honestly, I do agree with kind of what you're saying now. Today, I don't know if there was anything that Josh McDaniels necessarily did that really sticks out. I think last week the big issue with McDaniels was attempting a field goal when you only needed 1 yard to put the game away. I think that was a big issue. And then there were a couple other moments last week and even the weeks prior to that. I don't know if I would say there was anything today that really sticks out to me. What do you guys think? Is there something that sticks out to you guys that Josh McDaniels did today that you guys felt like could have possibly ruined the game for us? Now, if you guys think that the Raiders running the football at the end of the game, 3rd and 3, I believe they ended up running the football. If you guys think that was a mistake, I think that's questionable as well. Maybe they should have passed the ball, but, they had Brian Hoyer, a backup quarterback in, right? And I felt like after Hoyer's first 4 or 5 passes, the guy did not look good in the last 5 passes. It's going to be interesting as the Raiders kind of go forward because Hoyer did obviously have that deep pass to Trey Tucker. But I don't know if Hoyer's a guy that we can rely on once, the first scripted portion or those bootlegs, when you got to go through the progression, is Hoyer a guy you can rely on? I don't know. I think it's questionable. Kevin Lurker said red zone, and I'm not 100% sure what he's talking about, but he makes a good point. The Raiders red zone offense sucks, right? It's very, very, very bad. And I don't know how the Raiders can really fix it at this point because it seems like all you have to do is make sure Devonte Adams gets double teamed. And outside of Adams, it doesn't seem like any other player is really stepping up for the Raiders in the red zone. And I don't even know what the Raiders can do to fix that, right? One thing that certain teams do is they will let their quarterbacks make plays. Jalen Hurts gets in the red zone. He makes a play. Lamar Jackson makes a play. Patrick Mahomes makes a play. Justin Herbert will make a play. our quarterbacks just can't make plays, right? Let's just be honest. This kind of been the issue for the Raiders. Even last year, this was a massive issue for the Raiders. Derek Carr wasn't able to do it last year. Jimmy G's not able to do it this year. And we're continuing to struggle in the red zone. And you can make the argument every single one of the Raiders games has been a lot closer because of the red zone issues. In fact, if you guys actually go and look at the individualized stats, the Raiders offense is not that bad prior to getting to the red zone. Even on first and second downs, they're the sixth best team on first and second down statistically. I feel like sometimes we'll be in like third and threes, third and fours, and then the O-line kind of breaks down. And even in the red zone, I feel like we're just not able to get it in, right? I think for the Raiders right now, that is a big, big issue for us. So they got to figure that out. Hopefully they can figure it out. I feel like the offense has been getting better and better and better. Keep in mind, Jimmy G threw for 162 yards in the first half, right? He was on pace to have, 325 yards. He was on pace to possibly score for the first time 26 points for the Raiders. Plus, we had an interception in which Devonte Adams got hit, right? So I feel like the offense definitely looked better today. And you can say, okay, well, it's against the bad Patriots defense, and that's definitely true as well. But fortunately for the Patriots, Mac Jones didn't throw any pick sixes the same way he had done multiple times the past 2 weeks, right? Had Mac Jones thrown just one pick six, the Raiders score almost 30 points this week, right? Let's get into a couple more. We got another super chat here. We'll get into that. And then we got a couple other super chats as well. Shout out to you, Mally Mal. I really appreciate the $20 super chat. As you guys know, super chats definitely help the channel grow. You sit there at right tackle and Jermaine Illuminor at right guard. I think this is what the Raiders should do. I was actually surprised because Greg Van Roten actually got hurt in this game. He went down. And I thought they were going to make the change where Jermaine Illuminor goes in at right guard, but instead they put Jordan Meredith in at right guard. And I was kind of surprised with that. I think the Raiders should just roll forward 100%, at least for the next game, right, against the Bears. Just put Thayer Munford in at right tackle and Jermaine Illuminor in at right guard. There's no point of switching these guys back and forth. It doesn't make sense in my opinion. Let these guys get their footing under them. Let them get comfortable with the guys on the defensive side. And just let them play, right? And let's see what ends up happening. If it doesn't work, if Munford gets beat or Illuminor gets beat, go ahead and make that switch back. But we've seen it so many times now. Greg Van Roten gets beat, right? Or he makes like the wrong block, or he'll make a mistake, he'll miss a guy. We've seen it a number of times, right? I feel like the Raiders need to get the offensive line figured out. And I agree with you. This makes sense. Just put Illuminor in that right guard, put Munford in that right tackle. I believe last season when Illuminor did play right guard for the Raiders, we had some success running the football, right? And I feel like Illuminor is a very smart football player, and I think he has the body of a guard regardless. So I think that would just naturally kind of make a little bit more sense anyways. I think it's going to be interesting as the Raiders kind of go forward, because I feel like the offensive line did a lot better this week. And I don't think the Patriots are one of those defense lines that's not very good, although they did have a couple of guys out. I felt like their defense still is a defense that can kind of generate pressure and get after the quarterback a little bit. No sacks for that defense. So to me, I think the Raiders offensive line did a great job. Shout out to you, Mally Mal. I always appreciate you. Trevor Wyatt said, wish we kept using Tucker and Carter. Loved their speed. DeAndre Carter, man, had that drop. That was massive in the beginning of the game. But the Raiders did a great job running mesh, right? Which was one of the things that you have to do against man coverage. And Josh McDaniels came out and he did it. The Patriots love running man. Josh McDaniels knew it, and they ran the mesh at least 3 or 4 times, in which we picked up a number of yards. Early on in the game, I believe Michael Mayer caught one that was on third down. DeAndre Carter, I think on the first drive, ended up dropping it, but they ran mesh where you cross the receivers. And I felt like the Raiders did a good job with that. And then, of course, for Trey Tucker, we had that nice 48-yard pass. He even had an end around that went for like 5-6 yards. I feel like the Raiders got to continue utilizing these guys to run side to side, right? It's one thing to have guys that can run deep, and it's great to utilize these guys to go deep as well, but we need to stretch the field more side to side. One of the things I noticed with like the Miami Dolphins, for example, is they force defenders to really separate. And ultimately, if you make defenders kind of separate and you create those lanes on the inside, it helps your offense attack the inside. Sometimes I feel like our team's way too boxed in and there's just not good spacing, right? I hope that makes sense. But Trey Tucker, really, really good game. DeAndre Carter obviously had the drop. Had he not had that drop, he would have had a pretty good game as well. He did have one good punt return, right? Nothing major, but I think he picked up like 10, 11 yards, which on a punt is always good to get positive yards. Let's get into more of your guys' super chats. Jason Hall said Jimmy went to the hospital. AOC, or Brian Hoyer. That one's going to be interesting. I think Aiden O'Connell makes more sense, right? I would 100% roll forward with Aiden O'Connell. Brian Hoyer did look good, though, right? He did make a couple of nice passes, but I would assume that if Aiden O'Connell had the way Aiden O'Connell played in his first game against Chargers, it was his first game. He took 7 sacks. He wasn't really comfortable. But I would argue that Aiden O'Connell, quarter by quarter by quarter, looked good. Right in the final quarter of the game, he was pushing the ball downfield. He was getting us. He scored a touchdown on one of the 2 drives. On the second drive, we got all the way down to the 4-yard line before he made a rookie mistake. I think Aiden O'Connell gives us more explosiveness. Brian Hoyer probably gives us more conservativeness. And I feel like because of that, something tells me Josh McDaniels would roll with Brian Hoyer before he would with Aiden O'Connell. What's interesting is Jimmy G has now been here for 7 games with the Raiders. 6 games here with the Raiders, and he's already gotten hurt twice. It's crazy to me how this guy's always getting hurt. I didn't believe it. I didn't think this guy was going to come in and just continuously get banged up. And I know it's hard to predict, especially since he had to go to the hospital. So it's not like, it's a serious injury, obviously. I believe Adam Schefter reported it was a back injury. It's a serious injury, obviously, but the guy's now been hurt twice, right? And there's a chance he misses in his first 6 games. He's already missed 1. He may now in the first 7 weeks miss the second game. Right? I don't know. The Raiders got to figure out the quarterback position. If it's not Aiden O'Connell going forward, they really got to figure it out because we're already at 3 wins. And I don't think the Panthers are going to reach 3 wins, which means the Bears are going to have the first overall pick. You can even go further down the list. Like, I don't know if the Patriots are going to win 3 games this year, right? So the Raiders at this point may not get the first 2 or even 3 best quarterbacks off the board. Right? I don't know. I think the Raiders are once again going to put themselves in that spot where we don't get one of the top quarterbacks. Joshua Hughes says Adams doesn't seem happy at all despite the win. I didn't see any post-game pressers. I went live right away. If you're talking about how Devonte Adams was during the game and how he had the towel over his head, how he was kind of, he seemed a little frustrated. I would disagree with it, right? And only in the sense that even last week, Devonte Adams was asked about it right after the game ended, and he told us himself. He said, as long as we get the win, that's all that matters, right? I don't really care about it from a statistical standpoint. Another thing to keep in mind is Devonte Adams even healthy, right? We don't really know if Devonte Adams is healthy. Now, I'll say it for Devonte Adams. If I was Devonte Adams, personally, I would want my numbers. There's just no way around it. But coming into this game, Adams did lead the league in receptions. So it's not like, he's like 15th in receptions or anything like that, right? Hopefully he can continue having success. And if it's Aiden O'Connell or Jimmy G, whoever comes back, hopefully going forward, it's not the Bill Belichick take away your number 1 wide receiver scheme that we face every week going forward, right? I feel like Bill Belichick obviously does a great job being able to shut down and kind of take away the best player of the opposing team. In this instance, shout out to Michael Mayer and Jacoby Myers. Both guys stepped the hell up. Michael Mayer had 5 catches for 75 yards. Jacoby Myers had 5 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. So shout out to both of those 2 guys, man. Michael Mayer had easily his biggest game of the season. And it's interesting because, a lot of us watched Michael Mayer in preseason. A lot of us watched him over the first 3-4 weeks. The guy was struggling to not only, in my opinion, not only to block, specifically pass block, run block, but he didn't look great when it came to running routes. I feel like over the past 2 weeks, we started running him on more crossing routes and those type of things, and that's allowed him to create some separation. So shout out to the coaching staff to get him involved. 5 catches, 75 yards by Michael Mayer. So shout out to him. I appreciate the super chat, Joshua. We'll see, man, if Devonte Adams is unhappy. I don't think he is. Shout out to you as well for the super chat. Homyan, I probably butchered that, so I apologize. Said, a win is a win, so I'm happy, but I'm disappointed because fans want to see the Raiders being a true contender. Down the stretch, we are not at that level.
I don't disagree with you one bit. I think right now the Raiders are still figuring it out, right? I think that's very, very clear. The Las Vegas Raiders are not the team that they will be today, that they will become like week 14, right? I think when week 14 comes, the Raiders are going to be a completely different team. I think they're going to be a lot better. And another thing to kind of keep in mind, the pace that the Raiders were on in the first half, Jimmy G was 14 and 22, 162 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He was on pace to go for 324 yards this game. That was the pace he was on. He was on pace to score 26 points. So to me, I feel like Jimmy G started the game off hot. And let's be honest, Devonte Adams dropped that pass. Not dropped, but the ball popped out when he took that hit by Julius Peppers. And they intercepted that pass. But had we even settled for a field goal, we would have scored 16 points in the first half. That would have been the best, performance we would have had in any half or arguably throughout the game if we kind of continued that pace. I feel like the Raiders on the offensive side looked a lot better the past 2 games. And if I may be alone saying that. You guys may not agree with me, understandably, but I feel like the Raiders looked better. And I get it. We're playing the Patriots and we're playing the Bears, and we're not playing, the Miami Dolphins or the Kansas City Chiefs. And although that's all true, right, we're not going to play the Kansas City Chiefs every single week. I feel like this season is kind of a unique season where there's a lot of really, really bad teams out there, which is kind of interesting. But I feel like a lot of teams, especially on our schedule, aren't very good. If you guys do the math, I think 9 of our 12 wins are winnable games right there against bad football teams. Maybe 8 of 12 teams. I guess the Lions count as a good football team. So, yeah, I feel like the Raiders, a win is a win. I'm happy just like you. I'm disappointing as well. I'm disappointed in the aspect that, like, from a point perspective, we haven't put up more points, and it hasn't looked as clean, right? Like, we're letting these teams kind of stick in at the end of the game, right? The offense has to start putting games away, and the hope is just that we continue to get better. For as bad as our offense has been, right, which I think all of us kind of agree, it hasn't been a good offense, right? It's been kind of either average or below average. We're 3-3, right? We are arguably right there in the playoff picture. So, as bad as it's been, hopefully it gets better, right? That's kind of what I'll say with that. I appreciate the super chat as always. Let's get into a couple more of these questions. Raider Dad said we need to bend Jimmy G or trade Devonte. Jimmy G and his limp noodle arm is going to get Devonte killed. He deserves better than this hot mess. I don't know, man. We're 3-3 at the end of the day, right? If Devonte Adams is truly angry about the Raiders being 3-3 and he's maybe not getting as many targets, then maybe Devonte needs to go, right? But I don't think Devonte feels like that. I'm pretty confident that Devonte Adams is happy with the win. I think Devonte will get his numbers. I'm sure he'll hit 1,300 yards this season. I think the Raiders, again, are still getting better as an offense. They're coming together, right? In terms of benching Jimmy G, that's his own conversation. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But Kevin Lurker said Adams probably is hurting after getting blasted. He's probably definitely hurting after taking that hit by Peppers. Those type of hits hurt, man. I remember, when I played football back in the days, I took a massive hit by a guy that actually played for the Raiders. If you guys remember Eddie Vanderdoes, he actually played, I believe it was Auburn or maybe it was Placer. It was one of those schools he played football in right outside of Roseville. I remember playing against him. The hardest hit I ever took was by that guy. And, I could just imagine what Devonte Adams felt taking that type of hit. And he was hurt, right? He got up and he instantly went back down. And those are the type of plays that, this guy's going to start looking at Jimmy and might say like, hey, but I don't know. I felt like it wasn't a bad, some people on Twitter were saying, hey, that was a bad throw. He shouldn't have thrown it. And I don't know if I agree. If you're running a route in the middle of the field, you're going to take hits, right? That's why certain guys are scared to catch passes in the middle of the field. Devonte Adams isn't that. I think Devonte Adams understands that if you're going to run into the middle of the field, you're going to take a massive hit, right? Larry, shout out to you, said if Jimmy Garoppolo is out, would the Raiders panic trade for a quarterback for a potential playoff push? I don't see the Raiders doing that. Honestly, I feel like one of the things with this regime is the fact that we are very, very, very we're very conservative, right? Dave Ziegler, Josh McDaniels, I feel like from the player building perspective are conservative. We've heard that the Raiders are looking to trade for a pass rusher, and they've been looking for 2 weeks now. If the Raiders were serious, they would offer someone a fifth, fourth round pick, and that team would just take it. But the Raiders don't want to give up picks. The Raiders think picks are more valuable than anything else. So the Raiders are actually not going to trade and make those type of moves, right? They're going to keep all their picks. They're not going to panic. They're going to play as conservative as possible, even with any possible trade. I would be very, very shocked if the Raiders gave up anything for a quarterback, especially with kind of where our cap space is right now. Plus, we're committed to Jimmy Garoppolo. So the worst thing you could do right now is go and trade for a quarterback and be in that situation. Now, what if the Raiders went out and got Kirk Cousins? Like, would that make us a better team? I would say it would make us a better team. I think the Vikings right now are a very, very bad football team, and I don't think Kirk Cousins is nearly the problem for the Vikings, although I'm not a fan of Kirk Cousins. I'll be the first to tell you guys. I'm not a fan of Kirk Cousins. But Kirk Cousins is better than Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So, I don't know. I think it'd be interesting for sure, but I don't think the Raiders are going to make any sort of trade, especially if we have to give up a top 2-round pick. I don't think we're doing it. I think, and let me just back up here. I think the Raiders are doing a good job with how they're kind of constructing the team. I think as we go forward, we should get better. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on who we take because as Mally Mal leaves an interesting comment here, he says, Sanjit, what would our defensive line look with Jalen Carter? And that's the thing, right? That's the thing. If the Raiders had Jalen Carter right now, what would our defensive line look like? I think we'd be a lot better, to be honest with you guys. I think right now, if the Raiders had Jalen Carter as opposed to Tyree Wilson, we would be a lot better for sure because we would have interior pass rush. Although I felt like Adam Butler and Balil Nichols, as well as Jerry Tillery, all got after it a little bit at different times, right? Balil Nichols ended up with a half sack on the final play of the game with Max Crosby. I felt like our interior defensive line is still just not consistent enough. Multiple plays where these guys aren't getting after. It's really just one guy off the edge just kind of disrupting the play, and then these guys kind of just stand around and they'll kind of wrap up the quarterback if the quarterback tries to run off or whatever, right? If we had Jalen Carter, I feel like our team would be a lot better, especially on the defensive side. And you can make the argument our team still looks pretty good on the defensive side, right? From a points per game perspective, I don't know the exact number on the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure we're in the upper half in terms of points per game. And especially if you remove that one game against the Bills, we're definitely in the upper half. Our defense has kept us in every single game, right? Even in 2 of our 3 losses, our defense kept us in it. Honestly, if Jimmy G didn't throw that interception even against the Bills, right? Remember, our defense forced a 3 and out. We scored, I believe, a touchdown against the Bills. We forced 3 and out. And then Jimmy G threw an interception that basically gave the Bills a free touchdown. But imagine if we scored a touchdown or something, right? I appreciate the comment, Mally Mal. If you guys don't know, if you guys don't follow me day to day, I'm a massive Jalen Carter fan. I was so excited when he was still on the board for the Raiders to take. I truly thought Dave Ziegler was going to pull the trigger, and I was so disappointed when we did not take Jalen Carter. And don't get me wrong, I still liked Tyree Wilson, right? Especially pre-draft. I really liked Tyree Wilson. But Jalen Carter was my number 1 overall player in this past class. And we're seeing that now, why he was the number 1 overall pick, right? Jalen Carter is just better than every other person in this class. It's not close. In fact, Jalen Carter is already arguably the second best defensive tackle in the NFL. He's not even a full-time starter for the Eagles. Last week against the Rams was Jalen Carter's first game actually starting full-time. They had their 2 other defensive tackles that were not playing, Fletcher Cox, and I don't know how to say the other guy's name. But Carter, for the first time, took 40 snaps last week against the Rams. He had 2 sacks, right? He has 4.5 sacks going into this game. I don't know what he's done against the Jets. I haven't watched the game, but I think it was a massive mistake not to take Jalen Carter, right? And every time I get asked about this, I'll rant about it because he was the guy that I really, really wanted. So thank you for the super chat. Shesh Media, shout out to you for the $2 super chat. I'm not sure if you had a question. If I see a comment from you, I'll pull it up. Great Tribulation said, not a win, just a survival against a bad team. And that's a good point, right? You can definitely say that. But I will also, come back to that and say that's true, right? But we also lost our quarterback. we're up 13-3 in the first half. And honestly, had we not thrown the interception that we did, we would have been up 16-3. And if Jimmy G was the quarterback in the second half, I don't know if we gave up a touchdown on that first drive. I almost feel like when it was confirmed that, hey, Jimmy G got into an ambulance and he got carted, to the local hospital, I almost feel like the defense came out a little flat on that first drive, right? And ultimately, we did give up a touchdown on that first drive. And then to take it a step further, Max Crosby doesn't do what he does, right, where he hits the quarterback late. They would have kicked the field goal in that moment, and they would have scored even more so than that, 4 points less than what they ended up scoring, right? I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but I feel like if the Raiders had Jimmy G, we would have had a better game this past game, right? But I understand what you're saying, right? We survived against a bad team. I'm not going to disagree with that. I definitely understand it. But I'm going to say this, the hope is that if Jimmy G is healthy and he plays the way he did against the Patriots in the first half, if he can just kind of continue that as we go forward. Remember, we don't play a whole lot of great teams as we kind of go forward. 8 of our, I guess it's 7 now. 7 of our remaining 11 games, I think it's 11 games. 7 of the 11 games are against bad football teams like the Bears, the Broncos, the Jets, the Giants, it's bad football teams. So if the Raiders can just kind of survive these next few games against those teams, we can slip into the playoffs, right? Never say never. So we'll see what ends up happening. I think if the Raiders do get into the playoffs, it's a massive win for this season. And I think as we go forward, maybe we get that free agent to sign with us. Maybe, the dead cap comes off the books and we, get another difference maker on the defensive line. Maybe Tyree Wilson develops a little bit. And then never say never on like Aiden O'Connell being a really good quarterback, right? Never be out on that, right? Maybe he develops into something. Like we've seen the guy and he looks pretty good, right? But I agree with what you're saying. So don't think I'm disagreeing with you. Raider Prophet, shout out to you, said missed opportunity not playing Aiden O'Connell. Looking at the 3-3 teams, please factor in the bye week. Could the Raiders excel above the rest giving the trade deadline? I'm not 100% sure. I don't know all the other 3-3 teams, to be honest with you. But on the Aiden O'Connell front, I will say this. I think the Raiders probably didn't think about Jimmy G, going down, and they kept Brian Hoyer as the emergency quarterback. And I think we kept him as the emergency quarterback for, basically what ended up happening, which was if we knew Jimmy G's not going to start going into a game, we would prepare Aiden O'Connell. But for Aiden O'Connell to come in and take over during the middle of a game, I think it's a little bit harder because Aiden O'Connell is a rookie. And I think to ask him to step in and possibly do certain things, maybe the wrong way to move forward to Aiden O'Connell, right? I think Aiden O'Connell gives you a better shot if you give him the entirety of the week. But yeah, as you're saying, looking at the 3-3 teams, factoring the bye week, could the Raiders excel above the rest giving trade deadline? I'm not exactly sure what you're saying with that either, but I appreciate the super chat as always. We got another one here by 10 Commandments. He says, do you think it's possible to trade Renfrow before the trade deadline? Is this contract an issue? Tucker has performed well enough to make Hunter expendable. I think the Raiders should move on from Hunter Renfrow. Even if, we're not going to get a first, second, or third round pick for Hunter Renfrow. That's not his value. At this point, I think Hunter Renfrow is overpaid. I didn't agree with the contract back when we signed him. I didn't think it made sense to re-sign Hunter Renfrow. Not that he's a bad football player, but he's not a difference maker, right? He's a guy that will return punts. He's a guy that you can give an end around to and he'll pick up, yards. He's smart as hell. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was Hunter Renfrow that recovered the high punt that the Patriots had in which they wanted whoever to fumble the football. Pretty sure that was Hunter Renfrow that caught that. But, Renfrow's a smart-ass football player, but he's not one of those guys that's, going to put up 10 catches, 115 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's not Renfrow, unless you targeted the shit out of him and he was your only option. And I know he had that one season, but I think what we've seen from him the rest of the seasons is kind of the player he is. Plus, I think Jacoby Myers is clearly better than Hunter Renfrow. I think Trey Tucker has more upside than Hunter Renfrow. Right? You give Trey Tucker an end around, he's faster, he's more explosive, plus he's faster when it comes to deep routes. And it's just not enough targets to kind of go around. Right? I think at this point, the Raiders do need to look to trade Renfrow, and I think there is a good chance we do trade him. And if we don't trade him, don't be surprised if we release him by the end of this season. At the end of the season, not during the season, but at the end of the season. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I do appreciate the super chat as always. I see a lot of people saying fire Josh McDaniels and bench Jimmy G. So it's kind of interesting. But I appreciate the super chat. Raider Dad said, thanks for your quality work, Sanjit. You're head and shoulders above the other guys. Raider Nation for life. I appreciate that super chat. Thank you very, very much. Means a lot. For anybody that leaves a super chat, it means a lot. You know, half of these film breakdowns that I do, maybe more than half of them, they get demonetized because what ends up happening is I'll use a clip that, you know, Baldy's breakdowns or whichever other NFL analyst it is, they'll use the same clip. And even though it's a completely different video, they'll go ahead and just mark it and say that, hey, I'm using the same clip that these other guys are using, so I'm copying their videos, even though it's completely different. Right? I made a Tyree Wilson video that has almost 30,000 views. Made nothing off the video because they copyrighted it the second I uploaded it. So it kind of sucks, but and then I don't really go live either. You guys know that, right? I'll go live occasionally after a game, but I appreciate the super chats. I really, really do appreciate it. And I'm in a great mood because we won, obviously, right? Syed the Trucker, shout out to you, Sid. Let's keep it going. Still got work to do, but let's go Raiders. I love these comments, man. These are the best comments right here. Shout out to Raider Dad. Shout out to Syed the Trucker. Shout out to all of you guys, man. The Raiders won today, and it's going to be a good week for me. So I hope you guys have a good week as well as we kind of go forward. I know some people are out on Jimmy Garoppolo, but, you know, never say never. You know, Jimmy G could come back and start having more success as we go forward. Maybe our head coach is a little bit better in his play calling. Maybe Trey Tucker starts to develop a little bit more, and that unlocks a whole new aspect to our offense. Maybe the offensive line, right, actually starts opening up lanes, and Josh Jacobs, you know, 25 carries, a shit ton of carries for Josh Jacobs. Maybe the next time he has 25 carries, he goes for 7 yards a carry, and he has 200 yards or whatever, right? Never say never on the Las Vegas Raiders actually having success on the offensive side and actually getting better as the season goes on. Michael Mayer sucked the first 4 games. He sucked the first 5 games. But come week 6, he had 5 catches for 75 yards. He got better. He developed. He got more comfortable. I even saw the guy put some people down, right? So guys are getting better. And the hope is that Jimmy G, our head coach, our offensive line, the running back, the receivers, the hope is that these guys continue to get better. And more so than just on the offensive side, the defense is the best defense we've had in a long time. Right? I'm not the only one that could think that. I know you guys have to think that same exact thing. This defense is heads and shoulders better than any defense I've seen since 2016. And if you want to go even past that, like 2016, this defense has been the best defense in the last like 15 years. And it's clear because we're getting sacks, we're getting turnovers, we're getting after the quarterback, we're making plays, we're blitzing and pressuring guys into making bad decisions. I'm excited for the Raiders. You know, even if we only win 7 games this year and we miss the playoffs, you can tell that this team is actually getting better. Shout out to you, Haster, for the $5 super chat. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that donates to the channel. I hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy it. We're going to be doing some film content tomorrow, so subscribe, hit the like button, and I hope you guys just have a great day, and I'll see you guys later.